So, Sean,
Hey, how's it going?
I forgot about this mastermind thing. I was at the beach. I realized I still couldn't run with my bad knee, so I was trying to do squats on the beach, and I got a alarm notification about mastermind. I'm like, holy crap! How often do you forget?
Do I
Oh,
forget this?
yeah.
I usually don't. Um, I've maybe once or twice on like a Thursday gone, oh shoot, I've got this in the morning. I don't think I've ever straight up forgot. I don't know. I have a less. Of course, it's right after I wake up too, so it's not like I have something to do and then I got to come back to this. So
Yeah,
might be easier for me. And I have less going on. You're busy all the time. You're all doing
dude.
running on the beach and
Well, it's a gift and a curse. The one job that I don't hate takes all my time. Takes all my time. They're like they asked me on like three different occasions to convert to full time. I'm like, nah, I'm all right.
well, if they're
So,
asking you to convert, that's probably a sign you're doing well, or you're meeting expectations. So that's good.
so far, I think so. I mean, so I reached out to like my consulting firm, like, hey, I haven't really got any feedback. Um, I have my insecurities about, you know, certain things that I feel like I'm not meeting expectations, but also believe that there's only so many things I could do within a 40-hour work week unless they want me to bill in excess of that 40 hours. But nah, so far like, oh no, they like you, you're great, blah blah blah. Well, okay. So I did write some really sweet like code. I guess you call it middleware. It's the I wrote like this compliance like piece and this transmission piece that basically um, regardless of the date time that's that's assigned to various fields or properties of data or a payload before it goes out. I
Hmm.
just force it to be UTC, and then I also have it logging stuff before it hits the actual server. And I wrote some pretty cool middleware stuff where like developers just don't have to be explicit about things that should just already happen in the software. So I don't know. It feels good to be a astronaut architect that is probably like one of the top notch developers. So
Yeah, I can imagine. I usually give architecture advice, and I met with like what people don't get it, but
hold on, what's up?
I said I usually give advice about like architecture, how to
Oh,
construct things, and people tend to just kind of look at me funny, like, but this is what everyone says. It's like, or everything says, and this totally makes sense to me. It's just like, no, we're not going to do
that's
it that
one
way.
thing that,
But
it's, I don't know. Sometimes, I mean, you have different personalities. Some people, they're highly motivated, but they have a very different philosophy of things that doesn't necessarily correlate with the business. It just correlates with what interests them. And so, like, so like doing some practicing domain driven design, and people see opportunities for, oh, well, yeah, this is like what the business requires, but this seems pretty like custom for the business. And does that really belong in the business, or can that be a separate responsibility that a client can resolve of this service? And they're responsible for managing these aspects or this configuration. And like it basically distills down into some people they just want to write frameworks versus write to the programming model of the business or write to the business domain. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting the discussions that we have and trying to manage those discussions to try to help people understand like where the effort probably should go to in regards to return on investment versus what we as developers want to do because we want to express our artistic ability and be able to go to a meetup and discuss something cool that we did that really doesn't contribute that much to the business. It just contributes to our ego and our personal practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
No, I see that. I see that all the time. People who are very technology focused developers versus business focused developers. That's exactly like the case. I mean, there's a sweet spot where there's people who find a way to somehow bring in tech, and it's revolutionary, but also it's very applicable to the work they're doing, but and then what the business needs. But I see that all the time. People just yeah, yeah. It's um, I think I mentioned this before about that providing like country information about the business, and then somebody trying to explore using GraphQL to,
Yeah,
it's like that's a prime example of that thing is they wanted to use GraphQL, they wanted to explore that technology. They're like, well, I'll use it for this, and it's like all you needed was a JSON document that they occasionally will update once every 2 years or something, just a static file sitting out there. You don't need all of that. um, that's exactly I think what I was getting at when I told the story about that. So and I desperately want to like use Microsoft Orleans or something, but I'm not going to try to pigeonhole it into something that doesn't make sense. um,
well, I mean, I have a habit of injecting F sharp into half the code bases that I'm hired onto. Um, but you know what the obviously it's biased, but I think what the difference is, this is a debate, but it's fine.
mhm.
F sharp is .NET. Okay, so if you say this is a .NET project and F sharp is the syntax that has its advantages compared to C sharp for certain things, I don't feel guilty. I don't. If anything, they
Yeah.
should thank me for introducing something that they get exposure to,
So you're
right?
fine then if people on the project also use Visual Basic or manage C++.
I heard Visual Basic is great for managing XML, but they would have to articulate the case of what are the consequences for not using it, hence using C sharp instead, and what is the return on investment? What is the value, right? So, for example, all right, I am going to model this domain in F sharp. Okay. Uh-oh. Why would you do that? I'm doing this because for me, it is compilable pseudocode, right? It is for me easier to write out the core operations of this domain succinctly and to use the compiler to sanity check my thoughts. And it's very terse. It fits into one file. And instead of idiomatic C sharp having um, upteen files per interface, it's C. If we do this in C sharp, it's just harder to reason with, and it's stretched over too much of a surface. With F sharp, it's very succinct and it's consolidated to just one file, idiomatically. Right. Also, if I choose to handle some pieces that are that rely on various cases, at least with F sharp, the compiler will notify me that I didn't handle a specific case via its exhaustive pattern matching, right? When we're talking about switch statements or enums, right? So if someone can articulate the advantages such as harnessing the compiler or being able to consolidate compilable pseudocode to just one file to keep everything in one place for better clarity, then if you can articulate it, then I don't really have that much of an issue with it, as long as you can articulate the consequences of not doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I'd agree with you about the exhaustive pattern matching. Um, Probably not so much the because I don't write idiomatic C sharp anymore. It's stupid to put everything in its own file. Um, there's
Well,
cases where I still do, but it's because they aren't logically the same things. But
well, because I introduced F sharp as compilable pseudocode, that's what I call it. I don't call it F sharp. I call it compilable pseudocode, right?
mhm.
Because I introduced that, the consequence of that was because they're like, oh, what's the structure? Why is it why is the syntax like that? I'm like, okay, it's a record, right? And your language has a record too, right? And so now they're at least for the API structures that are meant to be like consumer friendly and flattened out a little bit more. They're using records for that now. That was inspired by my decision to insert some F sharp
Mhm.
into the enterprise. So now they have, instead of having a class per file, right? They're adopting some of the the practices that I exposed, and now they have all these record declarations in one file now, right? And it's a lot more terse. You don't have all this ceremony with public class within braces, public static void or public static string. All that stuff is just consolidated into records now, and it looks pretty dope. It still throws most developers off because they see within the constructor the value name starting with an uppercase, and they're like, that's not .NET conventions. It's like it's a record. This is those are
Yeah,
properties.
that's .NET convention. Yeah, yeah, it
So
definitely is the convention
it
for
just
records.
amazes me.
It's
I'll
hard
be
to it's hard to not like to remember to do it, but that's the way it needs to be done. Yeah,
yeah.
otherwise it
So
gets off.
I don't know. I think there's benefits to it. It's just a lot of developers, and like speaking at the last job that I worked, like I won't say a lot, but there's a number of developers where they just suck at articulating their rationale for why they want something the way that they want it that's contrary to the guidance that I'm providing. If you can't convince me or articulate the consequences of what I'm advising, I'm not going to listen to you. Like
Yeah,
you have to articulate what's likely to go wrong, what's likely to be a maintenance concern. And if you can't say that intelligently or clearly, and all you can say is it's a best practice. This is how they do it in the tutorial. It's a tutorial, dickhead. It's you look at the header file of that file. It says disclaimer: do not use this in production. Right. So I've had these conversations a lot.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's some things where there's probably it's hard to articulate the benefit, but you know, like you feel it. Um,
You should be able to articulate it.
yeah, but
If you feel that strongly about something, you should be able to articulate it. Else, who's going to have confidence in you, right? You got to be a politician, and you have to be clear and somewhat like academic in regards to facts instead of your opinions.
yeah, yeah, but there I think that doesn't give any sort of like uh, uh, it doesn't give credence to intuition. I think there's a lot of cases where you could articulate one way, but a feeling is actually a stronger indicator. Like this doesn't feel right, but it's idiomatic C sharp, but it doesn't feel right. Why do we put all of these things into these different files? Because it just doesn't feel like it feels harder than it needs to be. And maybe you can't at the time articulate why that is, but that feeling might be a stronger indicator of the right thing to do, even if you haven't figured out how to explain it to someone yet.
Uh,
Um, but
rum,
yeah, I don't know. I feel like sometimes, like I said, I explain something and I, I like just recently, and I don't take this as complaining because it's inner team stuff. But we have a service that was getting stood up, and the service I was trying. I try to understand, like, help me understand the like what context are we solving here? What is this supposed to be the home for? Not in like an entity service, but in terms of capabilities. Um, because it's setting, this one particular, like the API that it is setting like a payment type, but then it also handles which which is for payments, but it also handles like inventory concerns, and it's like should these be completely separate things? Is this a just like is a service supposed to be for to handle like choreographed use cases? In which case I understood that, and I said you could structure it such that the API represents the choreographed use case, and then you could have these two capabilities in here until those services actually provide them. Um, and I go through this whole thing of explaining and giving options, and it's like completely like no, I I haven't been given a good reason as to why that wasn't correct. It was just like, we just got to do something. It's like, well, you could do something, you just do this then.
yeah.
Man, but I don't know. Like I don't. I feel like sometimes it doesn't matter how well you explain it. I don't know.
I don't
I
know.
give up after a
I
while.
I guess I would attempt to articulate it as, all right, the way that you have these responsibilities grouped that don't seem like they're related to one another, it's likely as this code base evolves that there's going to be accidental dependencies just because they're in the same bucket together, and that's going to end up accidental completely accidental
Like
dependencies
yeah,
usually um, result in accidental complexity, and we're encouraging an environment for accelerated tech debt when we can slow that down. And so, does this really need to be grouped together? Because if they are, it will happen that developers are going to meet or strive to hit deadlines, and they're going to do the quickest thing of least resistance to get that done. And they're
that's
going to
yeah.
this is encouraging hacking code together. And is that what we really want to have a culture of, based on the way that this we're architecting this? Because this is an architecture. Architectures don't always have to be good. They're just decisions that are hard to roll back. I mean, that's the way I
Yeah,
would try to
that,
frame it.
that's basically what part of what I said is. Yeah, maybe I said it in. I, it's hard to know, like when you're speaking something in text, how people take it because it
Yeah, I
was.
know.
It's like I was like, this basically would is just setting us up to replicate a bunch of spaghetti code that already exists. It's like, why don't we think about boundaries and the integration and between those boundaries and what we're trying to accomplish, and structure it more abstractly here because that's what it is. It's in this particular use case, it's has to do with fraud, and it's like when fraud is found, what happens when fraud is found? It's, well, you put a hold on payments, you pull people's goods from the platform or whatever and those are two different contexts, like two different consequences. So ultimately, in my mind, that should just be two orchestrated events where the initial fraud event fires, like fraud found, and then those two services just know what to do. Um,
Yeah.
but or sorry, choreographed. But if we wanted, and I'm like, that I think would be ideal. But if we want to do a orchestrated handling of this use case where we dispatch off to two different services to say, hey, do this whenever fraud happens or is found, that's fine. But structure it as that. But the API just doesn't, like, in my mind, it's like this is the data point that we're like hiding this behind is flawed. It's a super flawed structure to begin with. It's doing way too much, and it's confusing, and it's not good at all. We're propagating that out from a service that's already I don't know. I felt like I
Did
gave
you
like
end
a
up losing?
dissertation on it. Just it was, yeah, basically not losing, but I was, it was just kind of like I just had to give up after a while because I realized it was like I wasn't going to sway anyone towards the idea of doing it differently than what they had originally planned. So um, I don't know. I'm not hurt about it. I just wish I could find a situation where, like, when I articulate reasons for something, people can articulate back, you know, valid explanations, like, to me, that feel valid, um, and explain where I'm wrong, because I get it in my head now that I'm wrong, even though I'm right, but no one's explained to me why I'm wrong. And if I wasn't wrong, then why didn't they just accept and do what what I suggested? So I just like I get left in this place where I'm like now like, well, shit, do I even is there any point in raising up ideas anymore if it's just going to be ignored?
Yeah, I
So
think
I
that's
was,
where most
yeah,
people fall into.
yeah, and it's all mental games. Like it's all just, it's all personal stuff, and I don't take this as like, don't get me wrong, there's no animosity towards anybody on my team or any feelings of like, being butthurt or anything like that. It's just,
Well, I think
yeah,
it's valid that like once the decision has been made that the code base is going to be modeled this way, that's the future of the code base, like most likely, and it's not going to go back. It's just going to be built off of it, off of those decisions. And so that's I think what most people are just uneasy about if they have experience and they've been burned by it based on their personal practice or again past experiences. But what's unfortunate I think is some people they haven't had that experience of it biting them, right?
yeah.
They're
Well,
still
no, it,
acquiring experience on certain design decisions. And sometimes they're not even there. They leave and go to a new job or do something, and they don't even see the consequences of their decisions. All right, that's what I call Congress, aka the nursing home. Right, they make decisions, and 15 years from now, like half of them are dead.
yeah.
Right.
Well, in this case, the I guess the argument is that, well, we don't. It was like, well, we don't really know the boundaries very well,
Yeah.
and I'm like, the boundaries are, and I even use this as like the boundaries here are clear. We have two instances where we have a hold, right? What is a hold in context A versus context B? It's the ubiquitous language question, right? A hold in this context means that your inventory isn't exposed to the world because you're found fraudulent. A hold in this context is your we're not going to pay you um, because you're fraudulent. um, so there's two holds, and both of those hold concepts are being consolidated into the same service. There's clearly a boundary there. Like, you have two contexts that are being, handled in the same thing, in the same deal. There's it's just so obvious to me that these are two contextually different things, and there's no reason they should be wound up in the same service. um, but I don't know why that wasn't. I'm still just trying to understand why that wasn't,
Obvious to other
like,
people.
yeah. And I know that they're very smart people. And it's just, yeah. So it's like the only conclusion I get to is I am either not explaining it very well, or there's a problem with me. And yeah, so yeah,
Roman said, I kind of have my boring stack, which is old proven tech, which I also know well. Like Jetty, servlets, ancient, a relational DB, some boring libraries. Can't use can't use mixed C sharp F sharp compilation. You start with your compilable pseudocode, which is in F sharp, and they can turn your F sharp into C sharp if they need to on demand. So for the last part, Roman, I'm only using F sharp for type declarations. I'm not using F sharp for any like business logic. It's only like type declarations and the relationships of those types that get compiled, and that's it. Because I know better to start writing business logic in F sharp, and then like I don't know, the CEO has a conversation with me or something. So I don't do that. It's just it's just interesting how people respond because something's unfamiliar to them.
Yeah,
And it's
unless
just
they're
interesting and it's just interesting how polarizing it is that I usually don't see a middle ground. People are either like uh set in their ways, hence they have like a fixed mind, whatever that term is. And then you have people that like, oh, let me research what's available. Let me see what options or strategies are to accomplish this. And you have people that like aren't set in their ways, and they're trying to figure out if there's something out there that can accommodate their need that may be foreign to them, but it hopefully it's a tool that will reduce the workload and the stress on their end in regards to like long term. And I just feel like it's just polarized. I've yet to like encounter any type of personality that's in the middle. So
yeah, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. But it's like sometimes there's misinterpretations too of like you're not set in your ways. You could learn a language or something different or bring in a new tooling, but you fail to see the reasoning. I don't think we give enough credit to just being good at the basics as maybe like the the boring stack Roman was talking about. Um, like so, for instance, something that bothers me is that, and not bothers me, but I find flawed is that the like the part of the like advancement structure at the place I work at now is tied in with like learning specific technologies and stuff like that. Um, or at least it's kind of implies that it's that way. And the like development plans are all centered around like learning new techs and mastering new technologies or different technologies, or advancing tech, your understanding. But the problem is that doing that requires that you have access to a particular project or product that actually uses those, and that and especially if you're trying to develop your skills, like you're incentivized in a way to try to shoehorn that new
yeah,
tech
okay, I
into
get it.
places that don't need it. Like this could be simply solved with this, but if I don't use this tech, then I'm not going to get a promotion. So therefore, I should use this new tech even though I don't need to.
Yeah, when I was in Cleveland, I was working at Rockwell Automation, and some of their some of their like review, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what you. That's why I don't want to be a full time employee because I don't like reviews. I don't. I just don't. No, I don't. I don't care how you think I'm performing every 6 months. Like I'll just find out if you fire me. Like, but yeah, I remember like they had like some of their like goals or objectives is like um uses design patterns in in feature development, right? And so that kind of like encourages over engineering right, using a visitor pattern
Yeah.
that to me,
We
visitor
use
pattern
the
was always
interpreter
cryptic to me.
pattern here.
A visitor pattern was cryptic to me. Like I still haven't grasped the visitor
Yeah.
pattern.
Well, have you
Um,
figured out flywheel? You got to use flywheel
Flywheel
everywhere.
or
No, is
fly
it flyweight?
weights?
Flyweight. That's
Fly
what it is.
weights.
Flyweight. Flyweight. You got to use that everywhere. No.
Well, the fly weights I think was analogous to like your text editor type software, where to reduce the load on memory, you have like a static reference for like each character or something like that.
Yeah. No, I was just making a point of like
Now I'm just
it's the
trying to
same
jog
as
my
visitor.
memory.
It's just like you. Yeah. Yeah. It's those really uncommonly used patterns. The only ones you use regularly are like
There's
what
chain of command.
is singleton and what is composition or um whatever.
I remember I had an interview a long time ago, like when I was like in my like early 20s, and one of the questions is how many uh how many design patterns are there? I'm like, I don't know. 23, I don't know. He's like, oh yeah, it is 23. Oh, but what does that have to do with the interview? Like that's trivia. Like
there's way more design patterns than that. Are you talking
I've
object-oriented
had
design patterns? Are you talking about patterns of enterprise integration? Are you talking about
I think he was
yeah,
referring to Gang of Four, but yeah,
yeah,
I've had interviews. And what version of .NET was this feature introduced for
dun,
WPF?
dun,
I'm like,
dun,
I don't
dun, dun,
fucking
dun,
know.
dun,
Like,
dun,
how
dun,
is
dun.
this
Yeah,
relevant to building like features or delivering software?
yeah.
Like, some
That
people
guy
they
doesn't know his stuff. He doesn't know what year the Poland uh, invaded Hungary.
basically, and then
Yeah,
I think everybody's had interviews where the hiring manager is reading off of a paper, explain garbage collection, explain polymorphism, and like they're just reading like like off the web off of some like website how to hire a .NET developer and the questions to ask them. I think we've all had those interviews.
yeah.
Explain. They're like, what's one question that always gets me? And I'm like, I've never experienced this at work before, so I can't really give an intelligent answer. It's always the same question. I can't remember what it is.
This is about what like
It's in like C sharp. Um,
is it like the difference between a struct and a class, or trying to think of questions I've had.
those structs are part of it because I never use structs. I'm sure there's opportunities for me too, but there's never been a a problem or a puzzle where I was constrained to use a struct. Like I had no other options.
Yeah, you don't
Like
really need to unless you're looking for unless you're looking for memory. Like if you're doing certain algorithms or trying to do performance sensitive things, structs help a lot, but most business logic isn't
oh
really
no
for
no
that.
no. Here's the question that they asked me, and it's always the same question with people that are non-technical that are interviewing me technically for a job. Uh, desc- Describe what boxing and unboxing is in C
Oh
sharp.
yeah, boxing and
And I'm
unboxing.
like, I don't think I ever like use it like consciously. Like it's just not something that I just set aside effort to do or
Yeah,
implement. Like I keep getting that question and I
yeah.
keep giving like I don't
It's one of those things I've heard of,
like are you
and
asking me
I
C sharp trivia? Like it's something that's not relevant for the type of business applications that I build. Like I don't pause and say, "Oh, yeah, we need to unbox that." Like those questions annoy me
yeah,
because
and if you the thing is too is that you can make it pretty far in the .NET world by just looking up the trivia answers to those kinds of things, but you could
yeah,
have absolutely no sense about how to solve problems
I still can't answer the boxing unboxing question. Like I
Here,
think it has something
let's
to do
make
with
so we can
casting,
answer it
but
now. It's the boxing is the process of converting a value type to an object or to any interface type implemented by this value type. Um, okay, so that sort of makes sense. Um, boxing is explicit, unboxing, or is implicit, unboxing is explicit.
yeah, like I don't care. I mean, I'm
Okay,
sure like there's some value in knowing it, just like there's value in knowing like all Hollywood trivia when you're at the movie theater 20 minutes before the movie starts. But like, is this really what you're hiring me? Is this
here,
really the basis for for who you hire?
yeah. So the gist of it is like what happens when you assign an integer value to like variable to an object, which is a so an integer is a value type and an object is not, right? Um, that's basically the gist of what boxing and unboxing is apparently.
Okay.
So you need an integer value, yeah, gets moved to an object type. Yeah, it's boxed.
And that is the decision that filters who gets the job
Yep, yeah,
for
that's it.
building business applications. Oh, and yeah, those other interviews, like okay, there was an interview like 4 months ago where they're like, "Hey, we're really excited to 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 meet you, and here's this take home assignment before our interview starts." I'm like, no, why not? I don't write code for free. I have I'm too busy with my own projects. I'm sorry. I'm not going to do your test. Okay. Now, if you want to interview me based on my resume, then we can have a conversation. But like I don't even know who you are. You're not Google. You're not Facebook. You're not Apple. You're not Netflix. Like I'm not going to do tryouts for you. I'm not going to audition for you because you're no one knows you, right? So I'm Scott Nimrod. Like Google me. I don't know who you are. I'm not going to try out for you, right? You don't deserve me to audition for you, right? And so, and I say that in a nice way, but I say that to them. They're like, okay, well, you don't have to do that, but we still would like to interview you. I'm like, all right, cool. And then they'll be like, in the interview, they're like, all right, well, we need you to install our software, and we need you to solve this code kata. And I'm like, okay, install their software. Hey, your software doesn't have IntelliSense. Yeah, we know. But you need to implement whatever code kata using this tool that we're giving you in our like face-to-face interview and desktop sharing. And I'm like, all right. I mean, I could do that. I'm just going to have Visual Studio set up, and I'm just going to copy paste the solution from my Visual Studio that has IntelliSense because
Yeah,
that's how I work. Like as a developer, I rely on my IDE. Most developers do. That's why they develop, right?
yeah,
It's reality, and I'm just going to do it in Visual Studio, and then I'm going to paste that solution into your tool that doesn't have it doesn't model anything of an IDE, but that's what you require me to put the solution in. Oh no, you can't do that. I can't do what? You can't write code in another solution and then paste it into our tool. I'm like, all right, well, I'm not interested in this interview. It seems like this interview has more to do with your product than it does about hiring me to solve business problems. And if you're not interested in me having a solution for the code kata that you want me to perform or deliver, and everything is about your tool, then it looks like this interview isn't right for me. And that's why I ended it. Right?
hmm, yeah. I
And
guess
then I
long
got an
story
email
short,
like the next day. Oh, Scott, we're sorry, but we chose to go with another candidate. They're a better fit. Okay.
yeah. Well, when you walk out of the interview,
Yeah.
of
Well, I hope,
course,
did you feel better like that? Like,
yeah. But I think we can just agree that tech hiring is just broken. I don't know. I wish there was more of a way that it's so difficult because it'd be better if you could just do something where you hire and then you like you can get rid of people really quickly, but that's not very empathetic to people, and it's like if you're gonna uproot your life, like there's no good way to hire tech. It's like you just have to do it and
Well,
live
it's
with your
it's,
consequences. That
it's referrals. It's like word of mouth from other
yeah,
developers.
yeah, that's probably the only really good way to do it. So like shared experiences. Oh, this person has got similar, like they I worked with them, they were amazing type stuff. But cold hiring is man, I don't know.
That's the other part is I think I'm getting better with it, but like so I have like a little bit of OCD. Okay, I have a lot of OCD, but I've been managing it better. Um, and so like something that I've been very careful in how I manage is when I delegate tasks or coding activities, I've I remind myself, okay, Bismonger, they're not going to do things the way that you would do it. Okay, but what's important is that it gets done and it's testable and it's maintainable. Okay, just because they did it using I don't know uh 500 lines, right? And you sincerely believe that you can do it in 30 lines. If it's testable, and regardless of it's 500 lines, it's still arguably maintainable. It's okay. You don't have to force everybody to do things your way. Like I keep trying to tell myself this,
Yeah,
but then I find myself wanting to critique their tests. Like, why is this test like 50 lines of code? Like, well, this test shouldn't be more than like, okay, my tests are like usually like 7 lines of code, right? Three of those lines maybe in a setup phase. How come I don't even see a setup phase? They don't have any stages within their test that articulate what's setup, what's test, and what it means for this test to be. And I'll just start going in. I'm like, you know what? Maybe it's good that they just wrote a test. Maybe I should just leave that alone. No, but F that. If I leave that alone, they're going to continue writing this, and junior developers are going to think that this is the way you're supposed to write it, and they're going to develop bad habits. And I'll just go down the spiral. Like,
yeah. Maybe the trick then is to always frame it as a you don't need to change this code. But here's a better way to do it in the future that you should consider
you
because
can't say
that's more
better.
help.
You just have to
Or
say,
here's an
have you considered?
yeah, yeah. So it's well, I mean, if it is better, you should just say it's better. But yeah, but yeah. So use it as a without saying that they have to make the change right now because they might have spent hours trying to just get that test in place and are just pissed off about it. Because
Uh,
that would be me in a lot of cases. I think I'm so annoyed by made like hard setup tests. Um, but they might have spent a lot of time on it and they might even be fairly proud of it. And if you're like, no, you should
I
change it,
steamroll
that's
it.
just like, yeah. But if you use it as an opportunity to say, yeah, have you considered doing this instead? It would be a lot easier or simpler, use this mocking framework instead of creating the mocks or use this or, whatever. Then and just say, but don't require them to change it as part of the PR. Um, then if they just ignore you the next time, then you could dig into them and be like, hey, I raised up that thing. Why didn't you give it a try?
Here's a question, and I had this conversation last night when I was working out in the yard, and I think it's interesting and it's kind of uncomfortable. But have you ever consciously monitored yourself or your reactions when receiving technical authority from someone that doesn't necessarily fit the stereotype based on social conditioning?
Say that again.
Have you ever had to correct your your thoughts or your default response due to instruction or guidance that you're receiving from someone that you're not that doesn't look or fit the stereotype of what you would usually receive instruction or commands from.
Um,
So, for example,
maybe.
let's go outside of software development. A 5'5", 115-pound woman with a badge says, "Get on the ground!" Right, in as much of an authoritative like yell as she can, and like, is your default, or is your default, okay? You take your time, you get on the ground,
No.
versus 250-pound Bubba, big white guy, big black guy, get on the ground. You immediately like you don't even have to you don't have to consciously reason. Do I need to get on the ground due to this person that's ordering me? You just do it just because you've been conditioned to relate to that as an authority figure versus maybe a woman that is very small in frame, doesn't have an authoritative like voice to command you to do something. And so by default, your first response is, "Oh, okay, I'll get on the ground," right? So that's the example. Um, but I was trying to relate that to within the tech industry, perhaps whether it's a woman or I don't know, a black guy that is in a position of authority, that sometimes I don't know. It requires some effort to resist your default behavior and just follow the chain of command. So is that a little bit clearer or no?
No, I get what you're saying, and n- no, I don't know if I've been in this situation to know whether to
So
I
for
think
example,
I'd like to say that I don't know that I would be any different about anyone because tech attracts.
so
There's
for
no like
example,
stereotypical tech. Like I mean, there is, but there's I don't think there's anything etched in my brain about who should be giving tech advice.
so whenever there's a lead developer or a architect, and whether they're a woman or a minority, that usually what you see on TV doesn't really map to them being in those type of positions. Um, you've never ever like questioned if they've considered alternatives to what they're advising you to do, in which like you're not necessarily challenging, you're just passively aggressively forcing a conversation with them that maybe you wouldn't necessarily do as much if it was a middle-aged white man with gray hair and blue eyes that has the same amount of experience. Like,
No,
I had
I
that
don't.
conversation yesterday, and I do it, and I have to really like, by default, my behavior is to automatically like question just because it's been conditioned into me to like, I'm not sure, and I it's something that I struggle with that I try not to expose, that I have to correct, right? And I think it's something that I struggle with. So if like some small little woman that's like a cop, like if she screams at me, get on the ground, like by default, I'm 6'7". I got this chick by like 100 pounds. I'm not going to immediately have the same response within a fraction of a second as I would if it were like a 250-pound man ordering me to get on the ground. That's kind of like what I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. So is like I mean, at the heart of it, are you getting to what's it called, implicit bias or whatever, or
If that's the term,
unconscious bias? I think that's the term. Um,
unconscious or subconscious, yeah.
yeah, I think the only like, and it didn't have anything to do with that. The only time that I really I caught myself once, I was at a conference and I knew somebody who was sitting at the bar, and this was a tech like um, it was a speaker meetup, right before the conference, and I knew somebody from Twitter who was sitting at the bar, and they were talking to a gal, For whatever reason, the first thing that came into my mind wasn't that's another speaker. That what came into my mind, oh, that must be his wife. And I caught myself later thinking that, and I was like, oh shit, yeah, that was totally unconscious association. I didn't, and I felt bad about it, but but there's
Yeah,
nothing I could have done. That's what the pattern that matched in my head. But um, I don't know that I've had any scenarios in tech other than that where it's been about authority and me questioning authority because of who someone is. Um,
I faced it before, and I mean, I can't say that it was like just subconscious, like I don't want to use the term racism, but I don't know what other term it was. Like I can't definitively say that, or if it was just that personality of that developer, and he does that with any person that's an architect that's providing like technical guidance or advice. Um, like I wouldn't know,
yeah,
but
I think there's a different dynamic with authority in stuff because I think there are people. I myself am a little bit more inclined to, um, at least
question.
within a realm I know about, to not really to question authority and to not really like just go along with it always, or to believe that just because they say I shouldn't ask the relevant questions, I should just accept it. And or to the point where sometimes I'll get, if somebody can't give me like reasonings, or I see that they're in a position of authority that they shouldn't have, then I might respond to that person differently. I know at my last gig there was somebody who talked in an amazing game about a lot of things, and vision wise they were right there, but at execution and how they projected what we had executed on was like, no, this thing that we put together is half baked, or you put together is half baked. You're not a proper steward of it. And it bothered me.
Wow.
It bothered me that this person had so much sway into conversations when they clearly didn't know how to translate that into execution. Like, um, and perhaps maybe there was some jealousy there because it's like I wanted to be in circles or in conversations that I wasn't included in, because this person was, and yeah, so that kind of stuff. But I don't know that I've ever like just looked at someone and go, oh, I've had managers that are female. I've worked with. I don't think I've ever had a manager who is, um, black or other than white. But I don't think I would assume that they're, you know, not good. I guess there might be some. Well, let me think here. I think there's. Well, maybe not. Now I'm thinking back. Like, no.
When they try to recruit me in the
Well, how do you know?
skinheads, I
Like,
think I
how do you know if it's? How do you know if it's a bias thing or if it's just legitimately
I struggle
somebody's
with it.
stupid? I
I
mean,
I,
they're
str-
not
I
stupid, but like,
I struggle with it. Like I admit it, and it's something that I'm just very careful about managing, right? Because it has consequences.
yeah. Well, how
Like
can you? How can you like? So there might even be the inverse in case where like you're so worried about offending someone because of their race or whatever that
race, gender, yeah,
yeah, that you hold back where you might not with a with somebody who's looks like you or is stereotypical, um, for the role. So I'm thinking back to like my first job, and there was an architect, but it was the thing is we did the same thing with all the there was like a trio of architects, and I don't think we treated any of them. There was one guy who was Indian, the other guy was like white, but maybe like Russian or something like that, and then there was just another white guy. And I don't think we treated them any different. The guy that was Indian any different. Um, we just thought they were all bad, like in
well,
terms of
no, I mean
architecture.
when a new person gets injected,
Yeah.
right? Is the default like, okay, if they're white and they give you um uh they order you to do something, by default do you immediately just assume that they're experienced in what they're asking you to do, versus a woman or a black guy that maybe has dreads or something that doesn't really fit the stereotype or the imagery that you see as an architect. So your brain is kind of
Yeah.
confused because our brains do get confused.
No,
Mine gets confused.
but I don't know
Uh,
that I've been in that situation before. I'm trying to think now. Maybe. I mean, so there
so
was at
so a
my
black guy
last
with
gig.
dreads and a gold grill provides you architectural guidance on, hey, you need to couple that, blah 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 blah. Like the brain will it my brain will I would have to know that person probably for at least a week in order for my brain to be at rest. Like, it's safe, Scott, just because it will be confused about what the imagery is and what the media associates that imagery to. Like my brain would struggle probably for the first week until it finally says, oh, this dude knows what he's talking about. Maybe it doesn't take a week. Maybe it takes like a hour long conversation to feel comfortable and secure that this person is better at this than I am, right? But it will require vetting, additional vetting
Yeah.
than it would with a middle aged white man, because my brain would just assume, oh yeah, this is what middle aged white people do.
Yeah.
Like
No, I don't. I
I'm
don't.
being honest about how this brain
Yeah.
has a white narrator when I read books. So it's like I'm telling you the faults with my brain.
Yeah. Well, that's. Yeah, I think you're just getting at the whole unconscious bias question, and I don't think. I think everyone's got it. It
Yeah,
might pop up in some contexts and not others based on our experience with again pattern matching and stuff. So it's.
yeah,
But I mean, yeah, it's. I think the only thing you can really do with it is try to be cognizant of when it happens and evaluate and try to um, interrupt it, and that's really all you can do. I don't know that there's any other prescription for it. It's just something that the more we know that it exists, and the more we train ourselves to recognize that when it's happening, the better off we probably are.
yeah.
Um, but then again, like I said, it's there's other dynamics at play. Like I said, is do you dare in some cases? Um, like I got to a spot where at my last gig where there was a gal that was, you know, she was more junior than me, but she was a contractor, and there was just stuff in the PRs where I'm just like, ugh, and I just got frustrated, um, because it's like am I I'm a contractor too, and I'm trying to train a contractor from another firm
I
to
think
help.
I've heard this before. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's like, and I just expect people to be at a certain caliber just to contribute. And so like, but I had to consciously hold myself back from giving comments that I would give to the other dudes because I realized that um, this individual would take any sort of criticism, or would take criticism as being like you're being very violent or towards me. So like, and there's a couple times where maybe yeah there was some sarcasm that I was feeling at the time in the comments, but and in retrospect I shouldn't have done that at all. But it wasn't at the time. I was just like frustrated with it. And, um, but yeah, then I just like, so I might hold back something that I would with other people just because I'm worried about getting canceled. I don't know.
hmm. And I was talking
So
about tests. Roman said, I often write my own tests, code in better style first in the code base so that some good examples accumulate, and then show that style works and is easier to read. I guess I could do that. I guess I could just covertly copy paste their code, refactor it into a different test file, and just check it in and not say anything. And they'll just discover it and like, "Mm, Scott. Ugh."
Well, is this person like? I mean, with
It's not
there's like,
person. It's a number of people. When I say that X Unit Test Patterns book that's over 500 pages was one of the major influencers of my professional practice, it is right, and I could tell when I look at other people's test code that they didn't read that book,
yeah,
right?
well, yeah. So here's the thing: is that if they're anything like me when they write tests, they might desperately want to find a way or to understand a way to make it easier because test writing in my book is like the most annoying thing in the world. Unit
You talking
test
about
writing,
that integration test or unit?
unit testing.
Okay,
um, yeah. So if and integration testing too, it feels like it's
integration test would be harder or
yeah
more
more work.
involved.
Yeah, especially if I don't feel like it's like we have a handle on the use cases yet. Like if it's a cut and dry service where it's like, oh yeah, these are the use cases. They're not going to change. They're well defined. But there's so much potential ambiguity in everything that we do that it feels like always just like a slog to get this stuff set up. But if somebody could show me the simplest possible way to scaffold something and to get it set up where I don't have to do all this ceremony, man, that'd be a treat.
Well,
So
start
if you
with
can make somebody more like to reduce the amount of time they have to dedicate to something that they don't generally enjoy doing, which might be the case if they're writing tests like that, you should you'd be probably surprised how like receptive they might be to critique, not critique, but opportunity, like you know what I mean, um, new ideas.
yeah, yeah. I honestly think that the only thing I could do is lead by example, and then they have to decide if they're going to practice it on their own time. Like, and I honestly believe in order to like improve your development skills, you have to practice outside of work, dude. And if you don't have time outside of work to practice because you have other obligations, well, it is what it is. But I just don't think that people just flip the switch just because you tell them of a more effective way of accomplishing some objective. Like they have to
Well,
like put in the work.
it has to be, if you give somebody an easier way to do something, that's a blessing. If you give somebody a different way to do something that's about the same work, or a harder way to do something that they don't see as easier, that's not going to be very receptive. If you give me an easier way to do something that I against something I hate to do or don't like doing, oh man, it's like you're giving something in that case. It should be well received. Just make sure that what you're doing is giving them an easier way to do something. It's like,
That reminds me of some of Mark Siemens' answers to my Stack Overflow questions when I'm trying to do these code katas in F sharp as I'm learning F sharp. And I got like 5 pages of code, and then he like gives me like a third of a page of code, and it does it. And I'm like, oh, wow, I never even considered that before. Like,
yeah. Or like recently, like in my current gig, like something that I came across in my last gig was this library called Refit for creating APIs. And when I came over here, they're actually using like generators, like it's like NSWAG or something to build APIs off of. And there's a ton of like configuration, and the code that's generated is huge. And it's like um, there's maybe some benefit in that the models are, you know, very complex models might be easier to generate from, but it's
I'm
like
going through the same
refit.
thing.
It's like you make an interface, you mark it up uh, like like a controller action, and you create your DTOs like you would with a controller. Um, yeah, you have to hand roll them, but you're only going to hand roll the ones that you need because everything in an API is pretty much optional. So, and then like people at first are like, "Oh, okay, all right, that's I guess that's kind of cool." But once they actually start using it, they're like, "Holy crap, this is way easier. I don't know why we wouldn't just do this everywhere." So if you can bring something to the table that's easier, man, just do it, and people will see the light if you can actually
Articulate it.
make their life easier.
Uh,
Yeah. So I suppose it's time, huh?
Yeah, it's been real. I'm glad I remembered to. I was at the beach and I'm like, oh shoot, I got a mastermind today. Damn, I remember I used to report progress on my passion project. When was the last time I did that?
Yeah,
Like,
do something. Just pull down a repo. That's all you have to do this next week. Pull down a repo that you haven't pulled down in a while, or something like that. That's not on your machine.
I,
That's your homework
I
assignment.
got like a month and one half left on my current contract. So maybe at the end of my contract, I could like just go ham for like maybe a month on this project.
Yeah. I was gonna ask about your knee. Is it so like
Oh God.
is it just hurt then? Like
It's so short history is in 2011 or 2012. I was training for the marathon in Mexico City. Okay,
hmm
I was in Tampa, Florida, and I I think I was probably on like my third or I was probably on my fourth mile, and I was in Tampa. I'm running on like sidewalk, right? It's not like this whole South Beach lifestyle, right? It's not even a trail, right? I was in Tampa. I was running on sidewalk or pavement, and my knee, my right knee felt funny, right? But I'm used to being invincible. Like I'm used to like, oh, okay, well, my body is trying to act like a little, so I just
yeah.
got to man up. Like I'm a G, right? And I used that mentality, and I just ran through that pain, and like something, I felt like something just tore
Oh,
right on my right knee, and I felt like my kneecap was like falling out of socket, like, and I mean, I was able to like walk back home, and I never 100% recovered from it. But I was, my mentality back then, I still have a fraction of that mentality. I'm like, up that. I'm a G. I'm still going to do this marathon in Mexico. And so I just bicycled for like the next 3 months. And
hmm
when it came to race day, I just had a Ziploc bag of painkillers, and I would just gobble them as I was running. like it meant that much to me, right?
yeah.
It really meant that much to me. I don't know why it meant that much, but I had just moved to Florida maybe 6 months ago, and there was a lot going on in regards to the stressors in my life, and I felt like this was symbolic, right, for this new chapter of my life that I was going to kick off and why I deserve it, right?
hmm
And I've struggled with that injury ever since. My left knee is like straight. My right knee, it's just been giving me issues. So like last year, I think I told you probably a year ago, I ran 4 miles like on the sand, right? Um, and it was great, right? The endorphins, I caught the runner's high. Like I'm a G, no pain, nothing. I'm a G. Walked home, nothing. Next morning, I couldn't walk,
Oof.
but my right knee was gone. Like I couldn't. I was struggling to climb the stairs. That went on for like 4 months. I I I wasn't conscious of ripping anything during that run,
Yeah.
but something was wrong, out of place. I got injured. I didn't even know about it. I don't know if that runner's high with all the endorphins was just like numbing the pain, but I didn't feel any pain. I was just feeling good. And so I tried to run a couple of days ago because I've been running on the trail. I'm like, up that. I'm gonna run on the beach. I'm gonna run on the sand. I'm gonna knock off 2 miles on the sand. And I completed a mile, and my knee was just falling out. And I'm like, crap. And then I tried to run yesterday morning, and I ran like maybe 30 feet, and my knee was falling out. And I
Mm.
was like, up that. This morning, like, okay, let me just try to like just sprint like 20 feet and just do that like, I don't know, 10, 20 times,
hmm
and it wasn't working. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do some squats for a while, and tomorrow I'm just going to ride my bike. I'm going to rent a city bike, and I'm just going to do round trips between where I'm at and South Beach and just do loops or something. So it looks like I'm just going to be riding bicycles and doing squats on the beach probably for the next month.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna ask, did you have you ever got it looked at to see exactly what's wrong in there?
No, I don't want to get sick when I go to the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the things where
No, I
it's
haven't
like
got it looked at,
yeah.
and I think I know what's wrong. Like, I think that I just have like really strong muscles on the fronts of my legs, and I don't have any. I barely have any supporting muscles on my hind legs or the
Mm,
backs of my legs.
yeah,
So it's constraining my bones or my knee to a certain area, and it's rubbing against other bone, and it's just not healthy.
yeah. Okay. Oh, cool. Yeah,
Or
let's just say
should
it's
say
like,
it's pushing my knee to rub against other bone because I don't have proper support to keep everything balanced in
yeah,
regards to compensating muscle on my back leg or hind leg.
yeah. I feel like
That's my guess, but I never got it diagnosed.
I feel like mechanical things are one of the few things that I'd trust, like hospitals or doctors and stuff to take care of. Like any sort of like anything else, it's like I'm skeptical that they know what they're really doing. Because they'll
It's a
just try to
practice.
prescribe drugs to everything. But
I
mechanical
know.
things like, oh, my bone's broken, or oh, my this hurts here. It's like, well, you don't have cartilage there, or your tendons are clearly messed up, or like mechanical things versus like biological things. I feel like they get it.
I wish nanotechnology could expedite for the next 200 years, like in the past, and then like they could just inject you with a whole bunch of nano machines, and they just spend the next like month repairing your tissues and all the other like um, matter, and then you're good, right?
Yeah. So
It sucks that we don't have that right now.
maybe one day. Probably not.
No, not for a
Not in our
while.
lifetime.
No.
So
All
you
right,
got to
it's
get
been
them
real.
little. You got to get some little micro aliens in your and inject them into your
Penis.
kneecap. Yeah. There you go. All right, that's a good place to end it.
All right,
All
it's been
right.
real. See
Yep.
ya.
See ya.
Bye,
Bye.
Roman.